Here we go.
Hello there, Trevor here. Just a few housekeeping items before we get into my interview with Brad Groznik. First, I wanted to give a shout out to Champ Sports Grill for giving us a place to record. It's very awesome of you guys. Thanks again. We did the interview in the cigar room downstairs of the North Atherton location, so you will hear some background music and the occasional pool balls clanging together, but just stick with it. After a few minutes, you won't even notice that stuff anymore. I guarantee it. I also wanted to give Dustin Lowe's a shout out for composing the theme music of the podcast. Dustin is a good friend of mine and does great custom composition work. If you're looking for a unique sound to your podcast, contact him at dustinlowes.com. That's DUSTINLOWES.com. I'm sure you'd be happy to discuss your options. His prices are super reasonable and he is a pleasure to work with, so I highly recommend him. Lastly, during my conversation with Brad, we never even got around to plugging his own PR firm. So if you're looking for some great PR work with a personal touch, go to groznikpr.com. That's GROZNIK PR.com for more information. Well, guys, I think you're really going to like this one. We started off talking about Brad's early career and ended up talking about everything from severed fingers in your fast food, how Trump's election might shape future communications, and the one thing that Brad just can't leave the house without. The interview is chock full of amazing advice for young people and seasoned veterans alike. Without further ado, here's my interview with Brad Groznik. Welcome! This is Design Approach, the podcast where we deconstruct professional success stories from a design perspective. I'm your host, Trevor Calabro. Today's guest, I'm super excited about this. He's worked in advertising and public relations for nearly a decade. He's managed a weekly community newspaper in Queens. He's helped win political campaigns for the New York State Legislature. He's developed advertising for print, television, radio that promoted everything from responsible retirement strategies to aid victims of Hurricane Sandy. He's placed hundreds of stories in outlets including the New York Times, USA Today, CNN, among others. He's ghostwritten speeches and op-eds for sitting politicians and union presidents. He's helped throw huge events for some nonprofit organizations. He's produced top-tier marketing materials for clients such as Bank of America, Norelco, National Geographic, just to name a few. He holds a master's degree in strategic communications from Columbia University and a bachelor's degree in English from Penn State. He's currently an instructor in advertising and public relations at Penn State University and is a co-founder of the Groznik Public Relations firm. It's my pleasure to welcome Brad Groznik.
Thanks for having me.
That? It's quite a.
That is wild to hear your resume read back to you like that. I don't even recognize myself.
Yeah. So walk me through your transition from English department at Penn State to going to Columbia.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like a pinball kind of my whole life, kind of just going from one thing to the next thing, always just trying to do just one step higher, you know. But like the corporate ladder just never really appealed to me. I'd be in a job for a couple of years and I'd kind of get a little bored with it, I guess. Or I would always maybe it's a fault actually. Maybe it's like I'm always just looking for the next new thing. Like once I have something, done, mastered, I'm looking for the next new thing. So for the English department, I mean, I entered Penn State as a chemical engineer major.
Okay.
And
Is it like a good department?
Yeah, I mean the engineering department at Penn State's really great. Yeah.
That's cool.
In high school, I math and science were I don't know, I did okay at them, and engineers, that sounded like a really good job, so I might as well just try to be an engineer. And then I got to college and realized it just wasn't for me. It wasn't where my passion was. I remember sitting in the front row of like calculus class because I had to sit in the front row because it was tough, right?
Yeah.
And the guy next to me sitting in the front row was sitting in the front row because he just loves math and like was just asking all these in-depth questions and stuff. And I think that was like my kind of like realization that I was like, you know what? I think like I would be a great engineer if I had that passion, and I just didn't have it for that. And
wait, when was that?
This was when I was in college. In Penn State.
Okay.
Yeah, so I switched to English because I always felt like writing and reading were actually the more challenging to me, and something that I felt really rewarded doing, like when I would do it well. But when I was an English major, I knew quickly I needed to figure out what I was going to do for a living. Like, how am I going to make money off that?
Right. Yeah.
So
Well, and that's like one of the most underrated skills, I think. Like as a professional now, seeing people that didn't have any kind of writing or communication background, that I think a lot of people could kind of like focus on that, and they would immediately upgrade their skill set in all areas. Like communication is crucial no matter what. But
yeah, that's totally my view. I think it's a hard skill to master, and I'm nowhere near like mastering of it. But I think, like you said, a good communicator. You need to be a good communicator if you're going to be a CEO, if you're going to be a PR person, if you're going to, but if you're going to do anything, if you're going to start your own business, be an entrepreneur, you need to be a good communicator. So I think that's kind of, that was at least my instinct. I hope it would pay off. So I started my career in journalism, and got a job as a journalist, and was in New York for a while.
This is post Penn State.
Yeah,
so
I graduated.
Got your degree.
Graduated. Started working as a journalist. Ended up in Queens, and I was the managing editor of the Queens Tribune, because I was like 24 years old. And
okay.
I should not have been in charge of this newspaper, but they really needed someone, and they gave me a shot, and I did the best I could. I felt like I was overwhelmed every single week. It was a weekly paper, so. Every week was like starting over from scratch, and I'd get the paper out every week, but it was really, really hard.
So what was your role there? You ran the whole deal there?
I was like the head of the newsroom.
Jeez.
So and you see this a lot in like community newspapers. They're really struggling. They can't pay a lot, so anybody with 5-6 years of experience aren't going to work there.
What
so
was
you get a lot
slant? What was the lean on it?
It was straight up like community newspaper. So those rags that you see in for free in supermarkets and things like that.
Yeah, cool.
Like those are the ones I kind of put together. Or like the ones that you're sitting around, you're like, who writes this stuff? Like, where does this come from? It's here, and but I love community journalism, and I love the community. I guess it kind of made me really interested in being part of a community, and it's how I got interested in politics and ultimately PR and all that stuff too.
So that was like the natural progression. So where does like the master's degree come in? When the whole Columbia deal?
So I lost my job at the newspaper because, again, like the other thing, not only can the newspapers not pay well, but like they're constantly shifting, ground's constantly shifting. So I found myself without a job. And I started looking for other jobs in journalism, and realized
You were living in New York?
I was living in New York, and I realized just every journalist was out of work at that time, and we were all going for like the same jobs. Yeah. And I just didn't have a shot. Like, there were New York Times journalists with like decades of experience going after these jobs, so I realized, okay, maybe I needed to like kind of switch my focus, and I ended up getting a PR job working for the New York City government, and it was actually like. It was a blessing in disguise. Like, I thought I wanted to do journalism my whole life, but then once I got into PR, I realized I really, really liked it. And it was in that job that I realized, okay, this PR stuff is really interesting, but like, how do I get beyond this one job that I'm at? And my conclusion was to go to grad school. So, I don't think grad school is right for everyone. I think it was the right choice for me at that time. Like, I had no network. I had a good network in Queens and stuff, but nothing in like advertising firms, PR firms, anything like that. So I really needed to like start branching out my network, and I figured, if I could get into Columbia, maybe that would help open some doors for me.
Right. So you're doing the government job, and it makes you kind of realize your new passion for this communication.
This field of communication.
And then you decide to pursue it further just because you wanted to make it your career.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, what was the day-to-day like at the government gig?
It was great. I mean, the government gig was really great. I worked for a New York City council member who was head of the Environmental Protection Committee, I believe it was called. So I got to work and do PR for like all this green legislation. Like, Mayor Bloomberg, to his credit, was actually a pretty big environmentalist. So he was pushing the city like towards all these green initiatives. And it was really cool because we would pass these laws, and I would be part of like, you know, the communication strategy behind the passage of these laws. And then you would see like...
So like what? Like what does that entail? Like coming up with the words around it to get backing from the community and stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, for instance, we passed this big green buildings legislation where all of New York City the government-owned buildings were going to switch to burning clean heating oil, right? And it costs a lot more to do that, right? But it's much, much greener for the environment. And actually, people don't realize this, but a majority of pollution in cities is actually coming from the burning of heating oil to heat buildings and stuff. It's not from the cars and things like that. So we knew that if we focused on greening this so that was the pitch. Like, so my job was to sell that to the public and to be like, look, yeah, it's going to cost more, and this particular bill wasn't going to like result in any tax hikes and stuff. But everybody's a little bit wary when you're like, well, we're going to why are we spending more money, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And you just kind of have to like persuade them that, you know, it's better for the environment, it's better for your health. It's better, you know, asthma rates in the Bronx were like terrible. Really? And this would, you know, like significantly reduce some of the pollution that was in happening there and stuff like that. So it was kind of like pitching those big ideas. And then...
is there like an education component to that? Like,
there's a big education
just like just now, I didn't realize what you just said about the car pollution versus the building pollution until you just explained that to me. So was that kind of like a hurdle?
It was, but yeah, it was. So yeah, there's a huge education component of all this, and then not only do you have to like, my job as a PR person, I have to like, you know, get it in the newspapers and convince journalists that it's worth covering, and it's a story that, you know, would benefit their audience and benefit, you know, New Yorkers to know about. Mm-hmm. But we would also have to go to other council members who we would need their votes and stuff like this, and talk to them and say like, look, this is what we're doing. Stuff like that.
So it's got maybe a little bit of the experience that you had as a journalist. You could kind of leverage that when you're trying to convince them to run this kind of story or to get coverage of it.
Going into government from journalism is a pretty natural
it's like a thing.
Transition. Yeah, because most journalists cover politics, or not most journalists cover politics, but it's a very like widely covered kind of area in journalism. So journalists are typically attracted to covering like of politics and stuff like that. So, you know, if you're gonna quit, if you're not gonna be a journalist anymore, like, you know, what do you know? You know, politics, and, you know, depending on what kind of journalist you are. But like, I knew politics because I would cover local stuff like that.
Cool. So so now you're at Columbia.
Yeah.
So was that like crazy hard to get into, or what's the master's program like?
So it was a part-time master's program.
Okay.
And I've been it's not as hard to get into as undergraduate or is. A lot of these Ivy League schools really are like grad school machines.
Okay.
And they have a small undergraduate population that and they do an amazing job at educating them. But then, you know, I think Columbia, like the graduate population of Columbia is probably like, I don't quote me, but like 4 times the size of as the undergraduate, you know, so it's like the opposite of Penn State.
Right.
You know, Penn State has 45,000 undergraduates and like 5,000 graduates.
Yeah.
Columbia is kind of the opposite.
It's all grad students.
It's all grad students.
So because of the just size, it's not as hard. The competition is less. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, like I guess it was difficult to get in. Like I mean, I was lucky to get in. I'm really proud to be able to attend Columbia.
Right. I mean, there's just such prestige. When I saw that in your bio, I was like, man.
Yeah, it's totally
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it was a part-time program, and so I worked full-time and went, you know, at school, night school kind of thing. And then and it took me 4 years to get a, you know, master's. So It was a long process, but it was something. But it really did like open my eyes to stuff. And, you know, I didn't have a communications degree. I didn't go to College of Comms or anything. So a lot of what we were learning were really, really new concepts to me. So I had to like really catch up
Right.
And then the other thing was, in order to get into this program, I think you needed like 5 years experience, like real world experience, because they didn't want people like straight from undergrad to go to graduate school.
Oh, okay.
So
you weren't the only one doing that kind of path. It was
pretty
much everybody.
Yeah, everybody was. It was like a bunch of professionals. I was actually the youngest. I was in my late 20s, but a lot of people were in their like mid 30s and stuff.
A lot of journalists.
No journalists, really.
Okay.
A lot of like advertising executives, PR executives, nonprofit executives, all kinds of stuff like that. Really, really interesting group of people.
Cool. So, so then you go to Columbia, right? When do in the bio we're talking about land in some big placements in some big venues, right? When did that start? Was that all? Was this all?
Well, when I was working for the New York
time?
City government, I had because New York is such a big media town, and what I was saying is we would pass these bills, and then it would get picked up by the bill would be used in Austin or Seattle or Chicago or San Francisco. So a lot of people look to New York for big city legislation, right?
Okay. I had no concept of this. So
no, it's okay. Yeah.
So your work, I mean, they literally just take the same bill.
They take the same bill.
Tweak it a little bit, or do you? Is this
they might
do you send it out to other governments?
Oh yeah. I mean, New York like prides itself on that.
Right.
New York prides itself that like they're influencing the way big cities are managed.
Man, that's pretty cool. So
yeah.
The reach of some of the work you did was like way more vast than you would ever really be able to calculate.
It was crazy. I mean, the big project that I worked on when I was in New York City government was also it was about fracking. So, 5-6 years ago, whatever, fracking wasn't really well known. People didn't. It was still kind of like a brand new kind of technology, and people didn't know exactly what it was. Okay. And these gas drillers wanted to come into New York State and start fracking, and there was some sort of bill, like law in the books, where it's just like no to new technology until approved by the government or something like this. So they had to get approval from the government to come in and start fracking. And I worked with my boss. We kind of worked on and just understanding what fracking was, because we were the head of the Environmental Protection Committee or whatever, and we were like, what is this? We hear rumors from Pennsylvania that it might not be so good. Maybe we should look into this before we just like let them in here carte blanche. So we had a lot of education, town halls and hearings and stuff like this. And this guy started following us around. Also had a similar kind of pursuit, and was following us around with a video camera. And he ended up making a documentary called Gasland. And it was nominated for an Academy Award.
I've seen it.
So here's me like working as first-time PR person, working on this weird thing called fracking. Yeah. And it ends up building a grassroots movement that results in an Academy Award-winning documentary.
Right.
Or not Academy Award nominated.
Right. Yeah.
It didn't win. But
that's the one where they're lighting their water on the faucet on fire, right? That like is that the?
Yep, that's it. Same movie. Yep.
Yeah, that was kind of like the iconic.
Right.
Scene.
Oh yeah, it caught on. Yeah, absolutely. So I was getting good placements when I was in New York City, because I was getting stuff in the Times, and I was getting stuff in like Time magazine and stuff or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
It was really, really cool.
What's that process like? Like walk me through, or do you have any like particular things that you remember stand out? Particular.
Let me try and think of a good.
Maybe
example.
like some outlet that was particularly challenging or just unique, or is it kind of the same old thing? Like you do the same process.
It's not the same old thing. I mean, you really have to think about why people hire good PR people is they're able to find the story in what you're talking about. And I think what a lot of people do is they either want to make the story about themselves, like, oh, you should write a story about me passing this bill about green buildings or whatever. And they should really be like saying, did you know that, buildings are the major cause of pollution in major cities? No? Well, New York City is doing something about regulating this to make our cleaner air, to make our population more healthy and stuff like this. So some people go out spin, whatever. I always take the approach that like, there's a lot of people in PR that are like jerks,
Right.
and they're
Like
manipulators,
versus,
liars, all
yeah.
that stuff. But I feel like there's those type of people in every job.
Yeah, sure.
And I think PR people, those bad PR people get a lot of ink because they're working in media, right? So the field has kind of a tinge to it, but a vast majority of people are trying to just do good work and tell really good stories that are going to change the world for the better.
Yeah, so here's a little context. So the way I met Brad, the way we met was at a CP Squared event, which I encourage any listeners that are interested in like the creative professional thing to check it out. And you brought in, it seemed, I don't know for a fact, I'm just guessing, it seemed like you had kind of spearheaded this.
Yeah,
you brought in the Center Daily Times editor-in-chief to come talk. And the whole event was talking about what they're looking for when they're thinking about stories and how they're going to kind of lay out each paper. And one of the things they talked about was adding like a personal kind of touch to it. So one of the things you did, it made me think of it. One of the things you just said was some PR people try to make it about, or some people want it to be about the person, like talk about how I passed this legislation or I did this. And then you said that other people are like, this legislation will help in this way. What about that component of like the...
what they're talking about
Susie
is
asthma, you know what I mean?
So a lot of times, sometimes you'll have a story like the Green Buildings Bill, which is just like a big idea, and it's hard to like relate to these big legislation, all these big legislative things and big ideas.
Okay.
So what you do is you find, Grandma Joe in the Bronx who has asthma and is 80 years old and has to like walk, 20 blocks to the nearest hospital.
Yeah, like personal interest. That's what
and would like benefit from, cleaner air or something like that. So you find a way to humanize the stories is what they're trying to say, and then they were also against like boring stuff that people just fall back on, like 5Ks and stuff like this. Like, we're having a 5K, you should cover my 5K. Like, no, like everyone.
Well, I just meant in your experience, is that also a tactic that you found to be, not tactic is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, an approach that you find to be effective and like, when you're trying to get stuff into CNN or something, is that the kind of stuff they gravitate towards as well? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it all depends. So the human stories do really well when it's a topic that's been covered a lot. So it's like a new way to talk about the same issues.
Gotcha,
so
that makes sense.
When Obama's passing Obamacare or whatever, there's only so many stories that you can read about, like the actual legislation and what it's trying to do.
Yeah.
Next, you want to know about that people that the legislation is actually going to help, right?
Right. So, and that's where your expertise lies, right? To take those things, dissect them, look at the end goal and try to figure out the best way to communicate that, I guess.
I hope so. That's what I'd like to think.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out exactly, like, I'm not as familiar with exactly how the process of PR and, and like what a PR person would be doing to influence those kind of like media outlets. So,
well, let me ask you this. So you're a graphic designer.
I am. Yep.
If you were working on a green building legislation, like how do you start your creative process?
Yeah. So this is kind of a theory that I have too, and it's part of something I want to bake into the podcast, is that, like, I believe everyone uses a design process all the time. Like, I think everyone's a designer, and I think in the modern economy, like, everyone is a designer whether they know it or not, and they kind of have to use this process whether they know it or not. And it's just that typical design process where you define the problem first, right? That's always got to be the first step. So that's how I would approach it. I would take the like universally known design process and start there. So I would try to define the problem accurately, as accurately as possible with the information, doing research and stuff like that. Is that?
I totally agree. So
is that how you do it too?
It is, but like I think there's a component that like separates us because you're more graphically. I bet you think more graphically than I do. So when I'm thinking about the problem, I'm thinking of it in a narrative sense. Like, in order for me to define the problem in the story and stuff, I have to write. Like, I have to write it out, and I craft, like, what that story is that way. Whereas like I've talked to other graphic designers and stuff, and they have to start with, you know, a logo or or like
right.
some sort of other creative component. And I think we're all doing the same like design thinking.
Well, let me clarify a little bit. When I say define the problem is never make me a logo, right?
No, I get that.
The problem is like something different, like how do you visualize this? I mean, of course, the end product will be a logo. If someone hires you to do logo design, but the real problem is how to make. I guess you're right, because that is baked into it. It does at the end of the day need to be some kind of logo, but usually during that investigative definition stage, you can unearth all different kinds of things.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree. Like
sometimes they don't need a new logo. Sometimes a client, that's happened to me many times, where I'm like, oh wait, you've come to me and asked for a new logo, but in fact what I believe you need is like XYZ.
Yeah, and maybe it's the tactics that we ultimately recommend to if we had the same client and they came at us with the same problem, I bet we would recommend different tactics, because I come at it from a communication strategy perspective. So I would say, like, I don't know, you need to position yourself in this way, and you need to tell this story, and you need to be doing social media like this or something. And you might focus it on like, you need to build a website that creates this kind of feeling, or I don't know.
It does seem like a PR person will come in and define some of those like market research things first, or help do that kind of, or that's part of a component of what I end up doing a lot too, is like, let's take a step back, and let's do the market research first, meaning market research in a broad sense. It doesn't necessarily mean, I'm talking specifically about like make a product or make a thing, but it could be, you could do that kind of analysis on anything. So, but anyway, it's kind of interesting to think about, because I view myself as a communicator, like visual, like I view myself as a person that's skilled in the visual communicating visually, right? So over 60% of the Western world are more visual thinkers. And I think of myself as one of the few people who speak that visual language, right? And I've had that since I was young. I've just always, leaned that way. So but of course, a majority of what I do, I've worked very closely with copywriters or with other creative professionals that are more, language based and more words based. So I guess help me understand that differentiation a little bit, like copywriter, PR. I understand the storytelling, right? But I mean, a lot of copywriters would say something similar. It seems like I think it's
similar. I mean, I don't know a lot of copywriters, and I've never worked inside an ad agency and been like a copywriter. I can't really speak to it,
like
but
a lot of crossover.
I think it's a lot of crossover, because I get a lot of work now, that's probably more traditionally a copywriter type of gig than it is a PR gig.
You think so?
Yeah, but I think a lot of it's really like all communications, including visual stuff, is all coming together. Like as a PR person, I need to be able to do video for social media. I need to be able to do like really like mediocre graphics, but I need to be able to do some bit of graphic stuff. So for social media, or for little things, posters, flyers, whatever.
I found the exact same thing. It's like the projects that are most successful, from my perspective, are the ones where I can truly collaborate with someone who is, where there's a couple different focuses. The ones that don't is if the graphic artist and the copywriter are siloed off and thrown over the wall kind of thing. I think there has to be that collaboration, or there has to be one person to kind of do it all. And that kind of sounds like what you're talking about. Yeah,
I think so.
So when you tackle one of these projects, are you in agreement about the define stage? Is that kind of how you would describe it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really? Okay.
I mean, so I run my own shop now.
Yeah.
And on my website, I have this, I call it the promo package.
Oh, yeah, I have it written down here.
And I think it's very much a design process. Like, people always want to know, like, oh, how do I start? Or like, how do we start working together? And the first thing I have to do, like, for my own edification is like, I need to understand your business. I need to understand like, you know, what the problems are, or what the sales goals are, or what motivates your customers, and why, you know, why are they interested, and then how do you stand out against your competition? It's all those kind of defining questions.
I have literally the same thing. I have a questionnaire that I use as kind of a template for. It's like 10, maybe 12 questions. You know what I'll do? I'll link that questionnaire to this podcast so people can take a look at it. And if you want, I can send it to you or whatever. But it's exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
It just kind of try to boil it down to, you know, you want to gather, in my opinion, I try to gather as much information and then use that to boil it down to kind of like the essence, you know. Mm-hmm. When you're telling a story, is that accurate as well? Like you want to gather all the information and then, this might be a true point of diversion with the visuals, because, you know, it's a little designer trick that like you take the first thing my first iteration of something after some sketches and after the definition stage, and I know what the right deliverable is. It's almost inevitable. The right answer is to keep subtracting. You know, you subtract to a point of ridiculousness, and then you go one step back, and that's usually like close to the best answer. Could you describe that from a storytelling standpoint? Because I suspect it's different. That's kind of loaded. It's
a really hard question to answer, because I think it really it depends on the story, and I hate when people answer stuff like that. But there is a lot of subtraction and addition when you're putting together a story. But with PR, you have to be very careful that you don't delete something that's important to know, right? Like you can't delete facts you don't like, you know, and insert facts that you do like, and then it's just going to appear really biased and not very authentic. So the trick is to include everything, but make your argument as strong as possible toward your version of the story, I guess.
That was actually, my gut was telling me that. That's why I asked that question, because I was thinking, you know what, that's something I can get away with.
Right.
I can because it is, you know, visual language. We're talking about metaphors a lot of the time, and you can get away with subtracting the naughty bits and, you know, emphasizing the good parts. So speak more about that. I'm really interested. So you tell the whole story. You try to tell the most. Explain that. What is the end goal? You're trying to tell the most accurate story in the best way.
Yeah. That's pretty fair way to. That's probably a pretty succinct way to.
So like you can subtract stuff and still be accurate,
right?
Is this where like ethics come in? Is this what you were talking about with the skeezy PR versus the good PR?
Yeah, I mean it's totally an ethical thing, and I think advertising has the same ethical dilemmas too. I think with PR though, the stakes are really high. So if like if it appears that you're hiding something, or you're not telling the whole story, like that typically just flies back in your face, right?
Yeah.
And that's how crises happen. Like you know, people are just trying to hold back, not tell the whole story, and then the whole story inevitably like all comes out because journalists are good at their job, and they're just like that doesn't check. Like first of all, like those two things don't add up. Like there's something missing in there, and they're gonna figure that out. Right. So as a PR person, you always have to fight with like the lawyers who like don't want to disclose anything and say like, you know, because the lawyer's job is to protect the company, right? And with PR, like you have to make the case that like if we try to protect too much, it's going to hurt the company more, right? So you have to kind of just bite the bullet on some things and get ahead of stuff.
So how does that meeting go with the lawyers? That's interesting. I never even thought of that.
Yeah, so
that can get contentious. Do you have any war stories or anything?
Usually the lawyers always win. The lawyers they hold all the money, like you know, and then so it's very rare that PR people win in those meetings. But I think it's becoming more and more apparent now with the internet, or just with like 21st century communication, like everything's out there. Like every text you send, every email can be like subpoenaed or something.
Right.
Like, you know, every phone message you've left, you know, everything's out there. So whereas lawyers, I think, or and you used to be able to hide things a little bit easier in like maybe the 80s when like everything was on paper. I'm like, whoops, paper went in the shredder. It's all gone.
Yeah.
Now stuff's all digital. It's just everywhere, and it's just like one text. Can totally change the story. But you said you never said this, and we just found this text that says the otherwise. And that's what happened with like Christie and like Governor Christie and the whole like bridge scandal.
Yeah.
It's just like they came out and they said, "Oh no, of course not. We never did this." And journalists just kept digging and digging, finding emails and text message chains and all this stuff, and they just can't come out.
And that ended in straight criminal charges.
They're like, they're
like going to jail for that.
Yeah.
So
as they should. They broke the law.
Yeah.
But they thought they could get away with it. And then even worse, they thought they could like dupe the public. And like that's gonna get like, and not only does the public get upset, but then like government prosecutors get upset at that. So like then they're really gonna go after you. So
I was thinking the same thing. Like you can, transparency is usually kind of where I like to live. I think that's almost honesty is the best policy kind of thing. But man, you can admittedly be a skeezy company or person and kind of get away with it in some instances. You can
look at our president.
Right. But the one thing you can't do is freaking try to dupe people. That is the one, that is hard to recover. People love the underdog. They love someone to mess up and apologize.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't take long for someone to, a celebrity to fall from grace and then, apologize, go to rehab, and then all of a sudden everyone loves them again. They're America's sweetheart again. And it's like, but the one thing you can't do is try to lie and then, try to get caught trying to dupe everyone, because that's hard to recover from.
Well, you say that, and we sit here saying that obviously, but then, Donald Trump gets elected.
Yeah.
And like and I don't mean, and I just mean this in the most objective way. Like he literally lied a ton of times and would get called out on it all the time. He's like, and he would say stuff like, "Oh, that I didn't really mean that," or whatever. And so what's scary to me from a communicator point of view is like now that people see that someone like Trump can get can still persuade people and get elected. Being very, very very close to the vest kind of stuff, and not really giving away the full truth all the time, and just kind of doing what's advantageous to him. Is that going to change, or is that going to change the way communication is handled going forward, or does it bring out more people like Trump to now seek office, or be more in the public eye?
What do you think? What do you think so it seems like, you can go, it could go either way, and maybe this
remains
is more
to be
divergent,
seen. It really, really remains to be seen. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I was of the crowd that like never took Trump seriously and couldn't believe when he was elected. Yeah. I mean, I was just shocked. So I'm still kind of putting those pieces together, from a PR perspective, and understanding like, how did that work? Like, how did he do? How was he able to persuade, half the country to vote for him?
Right. That whole rant I just went about, you can't dupe people. You're right.
It is. It's so different.
It was true until like the election, right?
I totally agree, right? And I think in general, what you said is still like gold standard. It's like that's the way. No. Just be
from
honest.
A company standpoint,
honestly is best policy.
When I'm talking with a company about their communication strategy, if I have some freelance client or something, I heavily advocate for them to not try to, this is I call it the Dove soap problem. So Dove soap, they over all the years, when they poll their customers, the number one thing people say as a negative is that it leaves a film, right? Okay. And time again, watch any Dove commercial. It's like, we do not leave a film. Their whole communication strategy is like, it's not literally a film. We use science to prove it. And they put like construction paper on the soap, and they like show like, look, we proved it that it's not a film. It's actually no film. So the truth is, there is no film, but the public perception is there is one. Yeah. So I would suggest to make that a positive, like the moisturizing power of Dove stays with you all day.
You're just extra clean,
right? Or whatever, but to claim that what the people are feeling and experiencing is wrong is like so short-sighted. I think
you can't fight public opinion. You can try to persuade them, but if you try and fight public opinion, you're going to lose every time.
Right, and that's why the whole Trump thing is such an anomaly, because I have these, my Dove soap analogy that I've used for years, because it's really true in every instance. But then this Trump thing really does flip the communication strategy on its head, because you're absolutely right. He was proven to be inaccurate about a lot of stuff, and a lot of people didn't care. Yeah, that did not sway opinion. Mm-hmm. So is he not? Is that like only awarded to specific character types?
I think
can a company get away with that? I mean, I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't know. I doubt it.
Yeah.
One famous crisis communications case that I really like to tell the story. I don't really know where it was. This Wendy's, and this might not even be a true story, but I'm pretty sure it's true. So it was some Wendy's somewhere in the South. Woman's eating her chili, and she finds a finger in it.
Yeah, I've heard this story.
And like everyone freaks out, and Wendy's is in a crisis. Like, there's a finger in the chili. How does that happen, right? Everybody writes about this story, right? Because that's just gross, right?
Disgusting.
And it's clearly it's just gross. So everyone wants to write about that story. Mm-hmm. But Wendy's calls up their PR firm or whatever, and they're like, someone found a finger in our chili. What are we going to do? And the PR firm basically goes, well, it's a hoax. It's clearly a hoax. And Wendy's like, how do you know that? And he's like, no one loses a finger and doesn't report it and just serves chili going that never happens.
Right.
Were there any reports of people losing a finger in your restaurant? No? Okay, it's a hoax.
Yeah, where's the
that doesn't
have that finger?
You have to think about it from a common sense point of view. No one loses a finger and doesn't report it.
That's so interesting. So you deal with people and companies or entities in crisis.
Well, I have.
When they call,
I have.
So is that that happens? That's what PR people do a lot.
Some of them. There's a whole field of crisis communications that PR people do. I did it for a little bit. I don't really typically do that stuff anymore.
That's a whole new environment, right? That's
there's a red phone that companies have. They call the PR people we got a crisis.
Yeah, finger in the chili.
Yeah, finger in the chili.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, so the thing is it's a hoax, right? Mm-hmm. And so Wendy's wants to do, what do they want to do? They want to go back and they want to fight public opinion and say, this is a hoax, whatever. Right. But the problem is, it doesn't matter. It's just, it reinforces the idea that fast food is gross.
Right, yeah.
Did you hear about the time someone found a finger in it? I don't care if it's true or not. Yeah. It's still just a gross thing. So what do you do from a crisis PR standpoint? So what did they do?
Yeah, what did they do?
They gave away ice cream. And what that does is it reinforces what people love about fast food, right? So they just kind of said, hey, look, this was a hoax. Come back in. Have some free ice cream. It's and then everybody that comes in is just laughs about it or whatever. And it kind of just spins the story so it's more about what you love about Wendy's. Frosties are amazing. So,
right, yeah. Yeah,
so I just think it's
just the Dove soap thing, right?
Yeah.
The Dove soap thing is that's a little different because you're taking the same. That would be if you tried to make fingers in the chili sound cool.
Yeah.
but it's kind of you just say, hey, remember all the good times?
Yeah.
So, man, I'm thinking about all these scandals now. You got the airbags, and what I've seen a trend in these companies is they just come out and say, hey, we messed up.
Yeah.
It seems like transparency is kind of winning, overall in
communication.
And the ones that don't really kind of screw themselves.
Yeah, I was really surprised recently. I saw a Wells Fargo commercial that was
oh yeah, Wells Fargo.
We're sorry.
Yes.
Here's the things that we're doing to change. And I was really surprised. And it goes to be seen like whether or not that works.
Right.
But yeah, I was surprised too.
Well, that's like a fact check
like
kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
when BP like starts spilling a while ago when they did that oil well blew up underneath the ocean or whatever.
Yeah.
They were just deny. We're fixing it. It's gonna be fine. It's not a big deal. We're good.
They lied about the numbers. Remember that? They were like underestimating the numbers by
they just dug
amounts.
themselves a hole, and that's that's why journalism is really important to a society.
BP has not recovered. Their stock is way down. The company took a huge hit for that.
Yeah,
and I think they probably, correct me if I'm wrong, but proper communication or a different communication strategy could have really kind of helped mitigate that, at least, because, man, you're right. I do remember that. Denial, undercut. They tried to fight the facts. They were fighting the fact checkers. And, at the end of the day, it's like, we can calculate these things. This isn't subjective. Right. We're not talking about some foo-foo random thing. Right. Like, you spilled this amount of oil, you court ordered, handed over the data, and we can see exactly how much spilled. So why would you even lie about it?
Yeah. So when I'm called into a crisis situation, first thing I say is like, this is going to be bad. It's not like you call a crisis PR firm and they can get you out of stuff. Like that's not how it works. Like they just, like you said, they mitigate it. Like you lean on you rely on PR people to help you tell the story in the most factual, but also a bit advantageous to your
remember the good
needs,
times,
right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
So do you is that a conversation that needs to happen, I'm guessing? So like a client would call, sorry I'm harping on this.
No, it's fine.
This like emergency stuff, but it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like a client will call you up and just say, emergency, fix it. And then you have to describe to them like, oh, there is no fixing this. Right. We just need to like stop the bleeding.
Yeah, or a lot of people.
Do they get that? Do they get it? Like,
they know no one gets it. No one really gets it.
They're like, hey.
They always like initially people really want you to kill the story or whatever. Yeah. Like, well, like whatever. Like, call the newspaper and tell them not to do the story. Like, we can't do that. Like, it's news. Like, you screwed up. They're covering it. Like, we need to like put together a plan to react to it in the best way possible.
Would that make a paper more likely to run the story if you called and said, "Do not run the story"?
Yes, absolutely.
I could see that backfiring big time.
Journalists love to hear that. They're like, "Oh, I'm definitely running it."
Right.
Now.
That's probably the very last thing you want to do. Yeah, I could imagine someone coming to me and saying, "Do not say this." Right. It's like, well, I'm going to do that again.
I mean, if the journalist has the story wrong, or if there's something critically missing, you can make an appeal to be like, look, like this isn't the story that you think it is. Like, this is the actual way it works.
Do you have any like stories?
I knew you were going to ask me. I really can't think of anything right now off the top of my head.
That would be a tough scenario, right? You'd have to go and convince them of or something. I guess you'd have to show the facts. Man, this has been great. We kind of like ran through most of the questions that I had. Do you have any? One of the things I wanted to ask, in your bio, you got like some of these really big time names that you've produced some marketing materials for. Like, Like we got Bank of America, Norelco, National Geographic. These are huge clients. Do you have any like process or story, specific kind of just details about those? Any one of those stand out? Or
so all those clients, I worked on those accounts when I was at a big fancy PR marketing firm in Manhattan. Right?
Okay, so we kind of lost I lost the timeline because
I was in Manhattan, and that's one of the cool things about working in a big PR firm is you get to work with like big clients,
right?
And you get to do.
So this is post Columbia.
Yeah. Well, no, I was going to school while I was working there.
Nice. So you're at Bank of America. This is the big one.
So I got to work on Bank of America account, and it was really cool. I mean, there was lots of money, so I got to fly around the country, and I got to go to like conventions and at the time there was the mortgage crisis and stuff. So in Bank of America,
oh yeah, put me in a time frame. Where are we? We're at.
So we're around like 2009, and Bank of America is going through this giant crisis because there's like this huge this mortgage crisis happening, right?
So you're at a giant PR firm. The bottom hits, right? Recession, or the housing bubble bursts, and one of your clients is Bank of America,
right?
That's awesome. It's like perfect storm, right?
It was. And what was great about it was like we didn't really work on the part of the business that was like dealing with all that crap. Like we weren't doing the crisis stuff. We were doing the like, okay, so a lot of people are defaulting on their mortgages. How do we help them?
Right.
And we put together this huge campaign, like nationwide campaign, where we go to like all these major cities and fly in with like Bank of America mortgage specialists and invite the entire public to come in and refinance their mortgage and really help them try to get back their home, right?
Yeah.
And my job as a PR person was to go into these cities and to pitch that story to the local media and have them come out and be like, hey, Bank of America is having like a free, refinance your mortgage kind of convention. If you have a Bank of America mortgage, come out here and see if you can help, see if they can help. And genuinely, Bank of America really wanted to help, right? So it really did feel good to work with them in that situation. But what ultimately I decided was, I was just one piece of this giant machine.
Yeah.
And for me, it was more fun to just like do a lot more, have a lot more responsibility, do a lot more of the things, and just do it much of a little more of a smaller scale. Yeah. Like I was okay working for a small company, but getting like having much more influence and getting to getting my hands in a lot more things. For me, that's what I liked. So that's kind of
Well, I want to dial back. I'm kind of like seeing a pattern here. A lot of the stuff you're doing or you've done in your career is it's got some kind of altruistic, kind of like.
I like it's community. Like, it's like I like to help communities.
But even more, it's like specifically helping. It's like an outreach almost. It seems like a lot of, at least the things you're talking about, which seemingly have made a big.
It's true. I've never really been attracted to fashion or fashion PR or celebrity PR or publicists like doing movies and like anything like that. That's an amazing field and people can do that if they want, but it just wasn't a fit for me. I like cut my teeth on community journalism. And what I loved about journalism from a community level was like, I'm helping this community. Like what I do helps this community. It helps somebody, right? And I just kind of always followed that path. So it's like that to politics to,
So was that a conscious thing? Or did you, I guess what I'm trying to get at is you're almost making it sound like it was just serendipity. Like, oh, I started this thing. But was there anything that is this a conscious effort to ensure that the things you're doing are making this, they fit into, you said one thing that caught my ear. I kind of forgot it. It was like, you said something along the lines of, it worked for me or it felt good for me. So are these, I'm assuming you had to make choices, you know, along the line. And were those conscious choices to try to stay in that kind of realm? Or was it truly like serendipity? Like it just made sense, step one, because you started here, it just also happened to align with your values?
I mean, I honestly think it's a little bit of both. I think I'm attracted to opportunities that somehow align with who I am a little bit.
Right.
So I go after those opportunities over others. So it's a conscious thing, but I also think it's like something innate in me that like I'm attracted to certain opportunities over others.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a little bit of both.
So my guess is a lot of people in the PR field or any field would kind of would share the same sentiment. They would. I could imagine myself being stuck doing PR for something that's doesn't align with my values. Do you have any advice or do you have any like, I don't know, some kind of how do you make those decisions? Have you ever had to turn down something that was really could have been lucrative but didn't fit your values, or do you just it's not even on your radar? And how could someone who is in that scenario kind of pivot out and do more things that align with their values?
So let me position it like this. I'm going to answer the question, but it's maybe not exactly the way you're thinking about it. Currently, I have my own PR firm. It's just me and my wife. It's a PR shop. It's like, I don't know, freelance thing. I don't want to make it sound bigger than it is, but we have more work than we can handle right now. And some of that work we said yes to because we say yes to money right now. Like, we need money, we need to pay bills. I want to keep my business alive. I don't want to have to go get a job. So I've said yes to a lot of stuff that weren't quite a fit, right? So I'm in a position right now where it's like, okay, I think, I've been doing okay, and I've been able to pay my bills and stuff. And I'm at a point now where, like, okay, when I get my next client, my next opportunity, I want it to really align. I want it to be really cool. I want it to be aligned with exactly what I want to do and what's really cool. And what I've realized is those opportunities aren't going to fall in my lap. Like, those are the ones that I really have to go out after and put together and work really hard to get. So my advice to anybody that's feeling stuck or whatever, try and figure out what it is you want and realize, like, it's not going to fall in your lap, and, like, no one's going to give you a favor, and it's just, you have to go out and make it happen. Right. So even though I'm like incredibly grateful that people pay me to work for them, and they like working with me, and I do everything I can to do the best job ever. Like, I'm incredibly grateful at that. I also know that, like, at some point I'm going to get burned out if I don't align my passions with my work, right? And the way I've kind of balanced that right now is my passion 2 years ago and up to maybe up to now, it might be at a tipping point right now, has been, I want to be able to work for myself, and I want to be able to work from home, and I want to be able to, like, learn how to find my own work and build my own business and work for myself and all that stuff. And that's been my passion. So now I'm at a point where, like, I can do that, and I've been moderately successful at that. I consider myself, if I can pay my bills.
I feel like you're being modest, right? You said you have a queue of clients. But
yeah. But now I'm at a point where it's like, now I want to be able to work for myself and do amazing stuff that I love. Like, I get up out of bed, just jumping, Right. And I still kind of do that now because it's like I get to work for myself, and I love that. So my advice, anyone feeling stuck, is to be like, go on Amazon, find podcasting equipment, and just start doing a podcast. Just start something, and good work begets good work. So you put this this podcast together, it leads into something else, and then all of a sudden you have your own talk show on CBS.
Yeah, well,
whatever.
That's not the end goal, but
yeah. I'm not saying
hear what you're
saying.
Yeah. And that would be my advice for someone. So, like, my end goal here is to do great interviews and get to know people. Yeah. Right? And the consequence of that is all the crap you talked about. So, you know what I mean? The consequence of doing that could get you to the next step.
Right.
And by the way, I think you did answer my question. That was some profound stuff, I believe. I mean, what you're really talking about, we're taking this like a 10,000 foot view here, but you're talking about happiness and, the reason, a career versus a passion, right? So you've had a successful career, you've built this career, and passion has driven it all the way, and now you're at a point where your career could become your passion, and they're one and the same.
Yeah.
And once you start doing that, I mean, it's crazy. And I've had the exact same experience. So my little piece of advice, it's right in line with yours. It's just a piggyback. I just wanted to add it on.
Sure.
What I do is, I'm lucky that I have a really good job, and I get paid really well for it, so I don't have that financial struggle. So this is kind of like, if you're having financial struggle, it's easier said than done. But I think in any case, it doesn't matter your financial situation. Just like you said, seek out the jobs you want to do, the kind of work you want to continue to do, and put yourself in those positions. I do a bunch of free work. I do a bunch of pro bono work for things that I value, for things that I think could use the pro bono, or could use some good whatever your skill set is, or like my skill set of visual communication. So I do those kind of things, and they have led. I can't tell you. They have led to. So I also have some freelance business on the side. They've led to the best paid jobs I've ever had. All started with free work that I did in the same area, in the same venue. Because, and you said another thing that I want to just recap is the do good work. This is just like a mantra that I say to myself all the time. If you do good work and you do it for for causes that you like, or for companies that you like, or for whatever, that align with your values, those things will just intersect, and it's like the snowball effect, right? So
just exceed expectations just a little bit.
Yeah.
And it just comes back to you.
So that's some great advice, to just go out and do what you want to do, and then you'll be doing what you want to do. It's that easy.
I think there's a couple narratives in society where, like, the overnight success story, or the like discovered at the mall, and now you're a famous singer or whatever.
Talk about an anomaly. It
just never happens, right? And I think people would just be so shocked to see how hard Britney Spears worked in her life, or how hard Justin Bieber did. Like, they work incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people just expect they just hope that something's gonna fall in their lap, and that's never gonna happen. Like, you just have to go out and get it.
Yeah, and the 10,000 hours thing is like real. I mean, it is absolutely true. It's pervasive in almost every single industry. Anything that doesn't, any success that you get without having that expertise is an anomaly. It's not going to stay. It's not going to last. You got to put in the work. At the end of the day, there is a process, and there is a methodology to getting to these places, and you need to be practiced at it.
Yeah.
So, some of you might be able to relate to this, but some of my work that I do, it's like I come up with the solution very quickly, but it's not just, it didn't take me 5 minutes to come up with that logo. It took me 5 minutes and 20 years.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Like,
Like, so, and what do you do if you're young, right? This is the young person conundrum. You probably deal with this a lot, right? With students and stuff?
Yeah, students, yeah.
Yeah, so the young person conundrum is like, I need experience, but I don't have any yet, to be vetted. And do you have any advice for someone like a young person? Like, how do you get past that paradox?
Right. So I teach a little bit at Penn State. So I go out with coffee, and I go out to coffee with students and stuff, and they have that same question. Yeah.
Is it like a mentoring thing, or?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I hope I make an impact. I'm happy to sit down and have coffee with somebody. I really don't know what they're walking away from it with. So, but the advice that I always give them is, well, first of all, they're saddled with so much debt now that, like, telling them to go start their own business or be an entrepreneur is really just like dangerous advice, because
it's like negligent.
It took me at least 4 or 5 months to, like, be able to pay bills, right? So I was living with my in-laws.
What do you mean when you started your own business?
So my wife and I left New York and moved here.
Yep.
We wanted to start our own business. We were ready to leave New York, and we moved in with her parents, and we lived with them for 9 months. And
sounds awesome, by the way.
It was weird. It was under the circumstances, it was the best way to get started, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, they saved me $20,000 in rent and bills and stuff, and they were so gracious to do that. So what I was saying is, though, like, I mean, we could have rented and just went into a little bit of debt like that, and we would have climbed our way out. It would have been okay. But with a student graduating with very limited experience and telling them to go do that with $25,000 in debt, like, that's just dangerous, right? So I tell them, like, look, you're going to have a side hustle for a long time. And I really encourage everybody to have a side hustle, you know, kind of the way you're doing design thing. And if you're not it doesn't even have to be money. Like, it doesn't have to be, you can be working for free. It could be like, just volunteer with like the nonprofit that you love, right?
Yeah.
And then just do your day job. So that's one thing I say is always get a side hustle. The other thing I say is find a boss that you really like and that's really nice to you. Because that's the person you're going to spend a lot of time with, and they're going to be the ones that are going to impart all their knowledge onto you. And I took the opposite approach. I wanted to work for the most hard as nails, you know, like bully boss, because I thought like if they push me as hard as they can, right, it's going to make me stronger. And it didn't. It just broke me, and like I wanted to leave really fast. And I wish I would have just sought out those bosses that actually liked to have me around and like wanted to mentor me and wanted to like give me like help me through struggles and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I always say like just try and find a boss that you really like and that you can see working with every day, because you're going to see that person more than your boyfriend, more than your girlfriend, you know? And so that's the other thing. And then the third thing I say is like just don't worry about money right now. Like just it's all about getting a job that you really like with a boss that you like. And if the difference is $5,000 for this terrible job, like it's just not worth $5,000. Like,
right,
you know, like the difference. I mean, not saying don't worry about money, because if there's $100,000 job sitting out there and you're taking a $20,000 job, yeah, like that's not really smart. But like right, we're with these entry level jobs, we're usually talking between like there's like a $5,000 difference, you know, right, between this one job that seems perfect but pays $5,000 less than this job that's less than ideal. Like just take that perfect job, and because you're going to be going after your passion and going after in an environment that's going to, you know, nurture you, you're going to succeed, and you're going to get that $5,000 back so fast, and you're going to be promoted and go up in your career faster.
Right. One of the misnomers of the 10,000 hour thing is that you just slog through that 10,000 hours. No, that's 10,000 hours of deliberate and right, accurate practice at a high level, right?
Right.
So it's almost like you
can't just go around,
can't count that time.
Kick a golf ball around.
Exactly. If you're just like working for someone that's stifling everything and micromanaging and not really allowing you to learn, or
and
allowing
if
you
you
to do
hate your like soul when you're in these jobs, like you're not gonna like be benefiting from that.
That's a common thing I hear. I just want to I need to get it in. It's like no. It's
I think I'll go work at like the hardest job I could find, or like, you know, work for like this corporation that I hate. Because
which is
like
fine
this good
if you're
experience.
doing the work, right? If you're actually allowed to do the work. I mean, besides the fact your life will suck, but you know, from a experience standpoint,
it's a depends kind of scenario, right? Everything depends, and I get that. But those are my three bits of advice. Like always keep a side hustle, work with people you really like, and try not to worry about the money too much, because if you do good work, the money will come.
Yeah, and that's like. That's a truism, you know. It's just true. It's right in line with what we talked about earlier. You know, good work leads to better work, and you know, same thing. Good work and better work lead to, you know, financial gain eventually. I guess there are some exceptions if you do something that's just not, you know, you can't monetize, but at least you'll be happy. So I'll hit you up with some quick fires.
Let's go.
So, the questions are quick. The answers don't have to be.
Okay.
It's just, you know, it's just.
Yeah.
But these are not timeline based or anything. So first question: what books have made the biggest impact on you?
So recently, and I want to talk. So I was an English major, so I read books all the time. But recently, I've been reading a ton of biographies. Okay. Because I really liked. You hear about all these successful people, and you know the myth is like they were always successful or something. Yeah. And I love reading biographies and learning about like all these like huge struggles they were up against and how they got through them and stuff like this. So I read this book, The Power Broker, which is a biography about Robert Moses, who is this guy who built New York, and it's a pretty famous like kind of book or whatever. So that was
literally built the city like back in the day.
So Robert Moses was the head of he's kind of known as the 20th century builder of cities, and he's the guy that basically invented expressways. He invented. I think I heard he invented state parks. He invented all kinds of stuff. So like,
was he big on the parks?
He was huge on the parks. So he was like the parks commissioner.
Okay, I do know what you're talking about.
His influence was just like all over, right? So I read this book about him, and that was incredible. The Steve Jobs biography that everybody kind of sees around is tremendous, and you get to really see both sides of him. You know, like kind of the darker side and the like successful Steve, and it's incredibly good. I'm reading a book right now about Vanderbilt and Cornelius Vanderbilt, and it's really good. So. That's my new thing right now. Like, I love biographies right now.
Cool. All right. What other like media with similar impact? You know, movies, web, TV.
So I always loved politics and music, kind of growing up. And
do you like play an instrument, or do you create music, or are you just into it?
I played guitar, and it's kind of like I got as good as everybody was in high school, and then I kind of stopped.
Yeah.
So I can still tinker or whatever, and I still pick it up every once in a while. We have a guitar sitting in our house, so I play it every once in a while. But I love indie rock, so I love like the Modest Mouses and the
It's like the heyday of that kind of music.
Those are my favorite. Those are my favorite bands. So those all made a big impact on me. They all sound scrappy and just fun, and yeah.
You know, it seems like almost everyone's got some kind of. Mostly creative people are more multifaceted than you might think.
Sure.
You know, like almost everyone's got some kind of. If they're not actually a musician that can play an instrument, they're someone that is way into music or any of the arts,
filmmaking,
all that stuff.
Painting. My wife's a painter. You know, but she does all kinds of other stuff.
I never asked this. How is it working with your wife at the PR firm?
I'm gonna give you one of those answers you don't really like, but like it works for us. Yeah. So I can understand how it doesn't work for other people, or I don't know, but it just works really well for us. We get along. Like we're true.
What's her role?
We're kind of true opposites.
How does it? Sorry, you're about to say that.
We're true opposites. So I'm very extroverted. She's introverted. Okay. She's very much a visual thinker. I'm very much like a vocal thinker. She's an artist. So she grew up, or she went to art school at Penn State, or she went to like art school at Penn State, and then went to Philly and did work for anthropology for a little bit. Oh, and then moved up to
like top. That's good stuff, man.
I mean, it was entry level job. She would. I think I'm really proud of her of that, but she would play it down. But
dude, that's cool.
Then she moved up to New York City and did event design and flower design and event production stuff. So she would work on like celebrity weddings and stuff, where like like celebrities would get married in the MoMA, and then like her agency that she worked for did all the flowers and did these enormous arrangements and stuff like that.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, so she's kind of
like a romantic kind of job.
She's like an event planner and stuff. So one of our SKUs for our own business is to kind of go toward event planning and stuff, because that's just something we both really like. I really like. So I ran political campaigns too. So after leaving the PR firm, I worked at a political consulting shop, and I just really like. I like campaigns. I like that there's like a day and you're driving towards something the entire time, like election day, and then like you like win and then or lose, and it's just I like that feeling. Like I like that stuff. And events are kind of like that too. Like you put on an event, it happens one day, and you're just driving towards it. Your goal is to get as many people to come and check stuff out. Which is why we started our flea. So we started this flea to to kind of do that, and we've already gotten like a couple event planning design jobs out of doing that. So like we did the flea totally pro bono. To your point, it was like totally free. It was just a passion project that we thought it would work really well in the town. So we did that, and good work begets good work. Right. So
how do you become an expert at event planning?
Yeah, you do one. You got to do one. Yeah.
How do you become an export at interviewing people?
Do one for free.
Interview a bunch of people.
Right. Totally.
What's the single most useful thing you carry around, like on your person? That's not your iPhone or tablet.
Probably my business card. And I remember when I was first starting my freelance business, right? I didn't have business cards. I went in to meet this person at Penn State. I sat down with him and I was talking to him about this business I want to start and all this experience I had and how I'd love to work with Penn State and doing some PR marketing, whatever. And the woman that I was meeting with just wasn't into it. Like for whatever reason, I wasn't saying the right things, or she just had no interest or whatever. And so I kind of broke down. I was just like, what's going on? Like what would make me look more like legitimate or credible to you?
Oh, you just asked her on the spot?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Because I could totally tell like it was just was just totally a missed opportunity. Yeah. So I was like, what would make me appear more credible to you? And she's like, I mean, I think you need a business card and I think you need a website. And at the time, I was sitting there and I'm going, what do I need a business? I'm sitting right across from you. Here I am. What do I need a business card for? Like, I'm right here. I will be here anytime you need me. Like, what do I need a business card for? But you know what? Like, she was so right. Like, the second I got business cards printed out and started handing them out, it's just a credibility thing. Yeah. Like, I don't think anyone's ever, like held onto my business card and like, what was that PR guy, and like found it again. Right. But it is something, it's like a tactile like credibility thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've learned, and when we were starting our fleet, I was like, first thing we need, website and business cards. Because like that makes it a real thing, even though it's not a real thing yet, you know?
No, that's so true. It makes it tangible. It's like, oh, this is the credibility because there's a website. Yeah. And the funny thing is, it takes about 30 minutes. But I remember being
so mad at her, just being like, "Well, come on! Like, what do I told you everything that would be on my website."
Well, side note, there's a pearl of wisdom in there, and you know, if you're in that scenario, you do that. You say, this is a lot of people are afraid. In my experience, are afraid of getting feedback. It's like feedback is, and ever since I started working at Minitab, it's all data driven, right? So it's really ingrained in my head that. Like, there's data everywhere. You can gather data everywhere, and it can inform what you do. Like, using the scientific method in every part of your life, and it doesn't need to be a rigorous study of mathematics. You know, it sounds so academic when you say it like that, but just asking people, that's you know.
Totally.
So I do a lot of user experience design stuff. It's not that hard to get real good data from just a few people when it comes to using a thing, whether it be a piece of software or a piece of collateral or just the barometer that you get from someone while you're talking to them. You know, like just getting that feedback is invaluable, and it could really change everything.
It changed everything for me. Yeah. That was some good feedback.
It's so funny that it's just something you didn't think was important.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah,
it's like, who uses a business card anymore? Like, what is a business card?
Right. Nothing. I like the part where you're like, I'm right here.
Right.
What are you talking about? All right, that was a good one. What's the one thing you've purchased that's under $100 that's made the biggest impact in your life?
Business cards?
I know. It's kind of piggyback on the same thing.
I'm also a big fan of field notes. So, like, little, it's like a little memo pad.
What's that guy's name?
Yeah, I forget his name. But I carry those around with me, and like my brain remembers things if I write them down. Like, I very rarely go through my notes and be like, what did that one person say? Every once in a while I will, but it's more about like if someone's saying something and then I write down what they say, it like connects or something.
Do you know what's interesting? It connects even deeper if you write it with a pen and pencil or you know, a pen and paper.
That's what I do. That's what it is.
Instead of type into your like laptop. Which I think a lot of people, especially younger people, might like scoff at. You know, like, why would you write it down? It's some kind of brain chemistry thing. It's
I think
like
it is
forming language. Well, I was like reading about this the other day. It's really interesting.
And it's also small. I can fit it in like any pocket. It's not like a big notebook I carry around. It's like I can slide it. It can fit in my shirt pocket. I just like it.
It's called field notes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll put a link to that where you can buy those.
It's like a moleskin.
Yeah,
you know,
they're cool.
And they're like cheap. They're like $10 for a pack of 3.
From the graphic design perspective, one thing I see a lot of younger people do a lot is first thing is they get on the computer. And it's not that I'm an old curmudgeon-y dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with that. It's literally this thing we're talking about. The same thing with visual metaphors and the visual like language versus, you know, like common, you know, language like English language. the same thing applies. So you can think, but this is all proven. You think better.
Yeah.
You can brain map. Your brain works better when you're. It's something weird. It's something like tangible about touching. It almost goes back to the business card thing, and then we talked about something earlier, like the tangible. Actually like touching something or actually like doing something.
Yeah.
It matters so much that the physical thing actually changes your brain chemistry. It's fascinating. But
yeah.
I always say, no, start on the pad and pencil, use design principles, and then take, that's a further step. And then this is the last one. This is the last quick fire. If you had like a time machine, you went back 10 years and ran into your 10-year younger self, what kind of advice would you give yourself?
I mean, I would honestly tell them those same 3 pieces of advice that I give to students now, because I learned that the hard way.
Right.
I chased after a couple extra $1,000. I got the worst jobs, and I never had a side hustle until just recently. I expected things to just fall in my lap, and I wish I would just be like, man, you're miserable because like you were just expecting everything to just fall in your lap. Like, knock it off. Like, just. And I was a hard worker, but I always thought like if I did well in my job, like 9 to 5, that was good enough or whatever. And it can be if you are in the right job or whatever. But I also think like just put a little extra in, and your life is going to be a little bit extra better, I guess.
Yeah, that's some great advice, and I like the tie-in. It does seem like those things. I can see that from the very first thing we talked about. You know what I mean? Like how you talked about the transition to Columbia and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it seems like those kind of ideas are just pervasive, and they're kind of truisms. So
it's what I've found. Like, if I have any advice like that, I got to base it off like with the life I've lived, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
That's where it's coming from.
Cool. Well, once again, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I feel like we just kind of scratched the surface. I feel like there has to be.
We got going towards it. Yeah, we got going. Second
half
I thought was really good.
Yeah, we need to do this again, and
we'll interview a bunch more people, and then bring me back, and then I'll do it again. Absolutely.
Well, thanks again, everyone.
Of course. I loved it. Pleasure.
Well, there you have it. Brad Groznik, everyone. What a nice and humble guy. Absolute pleasure sitting down and talking with him. If you want more information about the flea market he talked about at the end, go to popupav.com. Also, make sure to check out the show notes. I try to take anything that we referenced, compile that up, threw some links down there for you to check out at some other time. And congratulations, you made it all the way to the end. I appreciate your time here. Thanks for listening, and until next time.